All right, I just wrapped up a lesson with one of my players. He's a college player that I work with, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to highlight how some of these new trackers that we have in Sportsbox can benefit you being the coach. So Declan came to me and he mentioned how he was struggling to hit the ball up in the air. It was getting really low, wasn't hitting it as far, and he wasn't sure what was happening in his golf swing. So I want to show you how I use some of these new trackers to kind of assess the situation and really be able to get him to be hitting the ball higher and increase that club head speed a little bit. So if you swipe up, you'll obviously get a list of all the different trackers there. And for Declan, we're going to look at these core gain factors in a second. There's going to be a few other trackers that we talk about as well. So you're going to see the new trackers, club head speed max, mid-hand speed, that one's been in there, but you'll see hand speed max. And then obviously you'll see these kinematic sequence numbers. Looking at turn speed maxes for pelvis, chest, lead upper arm, shaft speed max. And then obviously these core gain factors that we're going to be using. Now, think of gain factors like smash factor, right? Take ball speed, club head speed, get you that 1.5 smash factor, right? The same thing is what we're doing for the bottom, except it's not, ball speed and club head speed. It's going to be one segment to another segment. So for core gain factor, pelvis and chest, rotational speeds is what that's looking at. Shoulder gain factor is going to be chest and lead upper arm. Wrist gain factor is going to be lead upper arm to shaft speed. So these numbers do have a really good meaning to them. Like how we know, a good smash factor is 1.5. We're going to have that in our, point of reference as we move forward as a coaching community. So to give you an understanding, core gain factor 1.5 is what you're looking for with a mid-iron. Shoulder gain factor is going to be 1.4 is what you're looking for. And then that wrist gain factor is going to be 2.4. All right, and that's all for a mid-iron. Declan here is hitting a 7-iron. Now, if we wanted to look into this a little bit deeper, and you want to see how we came up with that shoulder gain factor, what we would do is pull up the chest turn speed max and the lead upper arm speed max. And so you'll see here when I go to add those numbers, we can see here's that chest turn speed max, here's lead upper arm speed max. Now, for chest turn speed max, for the PGA Tour, the average is 693 degrees per second. For lead upper arm, it's going to be 945 degrees per second with the mid-iron. So we can see for Declan, he does a pretty good job with his chest. He's going to be a little bit underneath that PGA Tour average. He doesn't hit it as far as a PGA Tour player, so that's kind of expected. But when we look at that lead upper arm, we're going to see a pretty big gap. He's at 788. We're looking for him to be at 945. So if you took that lead upper arm speed and divided it by chest turn speed max, that's how we come up with this 1.26 shoulder gain factor. And so for Declan, we know, okay, 1.4 is the number that we want him to have. We can see he's at 1.26. So there's something that's happening here that is making it so that he isn't creating enough speed in that lead upper arm. So, when I'm on the lesson tee actually looking at this, I'm not going as in depth, right? I'm trying to provide some context for you guys to kind of understand my thought process and how I came to this conclusion. So realistically for me, when I had Declan in front of me, I was just curious. All right, let's take a look at those gain factors. Right away, I noticed shoulder gain factor, 1.26 seems a little bit low. That's what I wanted to focus on. All right, why is that happening? So as I was looking at Declan's swing here, I wanted to be able to see, well, what is it that's making it so that that lead upper arm isn't moving as fast? Okay, where is that inefficiency? And when I looked at it, there was a couple things I wanted to see. The numbers I ended up pulling up for Declan are going to be these ones. I wanted to see lead wrist angle, and I also wanted to be able to see his mid-hand sway. Something that stood out to me in his golf swing when I was watching him was just how far behind him his hands were. And so I was curious about a couple of things, okay? What's causing it so that his hands are too far behind him? We can even see that in his mid-hand sway. It's at, negative 12 inches. And if I click on that, you could see, obviously, what the PGA Tour players do here. So anywhere from essentially negative 10.9 to negative 6.3 is what we're looking for. For us coaches that are used to looking at things from a 2D standpoint, obviously that gap right there, we don't want to see. So right away when I was watching him, that stood out to me. So that indicated, all right, let me go and look at that mid-hand sway number and see where it's at. Right away I see, all right, it's negative 12.1. The other thing I was curious about is typically when you have somebody that, has too much mid-hand sway on the way down, essentially the hands aren't forward enough, what am I going to look at? That lead wrist angle. They're usually going to be releasing the club too early when this happens. And the last thing that I wanted to look at was actually the visual of the mid-hand path. And looking at that visual, we're going to notice here how that yellow and orange line are just pretty close together, okay? So we can see in Declan's swing, kind of where the issues are coming from, all right? So we know as he's going down, he's releasing that club a little too early. His hands are getting stuck behind him a little bit too much, and he's really not creating the space from that yellow to orange line like I like to see. Now, what's causing that? How did I fix this for him in his game? So if we look at his lead wrist angle and in transition, what happens, we're going to notice right away, he goes from 98 degrees of lead wrist angle, and he's going to be releasing that club to 102.7. And from there on out, it just keeps releasing, okay? So he's not adding any more angle on the way down. And so that right there is how we kind of solved the problem, okay? We actually had him feel like he was adding some angle in transition, and that's what's going to clean up his movement here. Like I said, I'm providing a lot more information than I did like on the lesson tee to Declan, because for him, I can keep this pretty, high level, I would say. And so, like I said, I started from that point of view of, okay, what are those gain factors, since, he wanted to know, why is it that he's not hitting the golf ball as far? Why is it that the ball is going lower? Like I said, shoulder gain factor stood out to me being 1.26. We want that to be 1.4. From there, it's like, okay, what could cause that shoulder gain factor to be a little low? And so right away, I knew kind of which numbers I wanted to look at, especially after watching him swing. When I was watching him swing, it stood out to me that it didn't look like he was adding any angle on the way down in transition. And you could see how he was releasing the club too early and his hands were just staying behind him too much. And so from there, that indicated, all right, let me just pull up those two trackers I pulled up earlier. When we're looking at flex, we're going to be looking at that lead wrist angle. And then when I pull up that sway, we're going to look at that mid-hand sway. And right there, that tells the story for me. I can see, okay, definitely has too much mid-hand sway. Essentially, his hands aren't moving, towards the target as much as we can. We can even see that on the visual of the avatar there. And so by adding a little bit more angle on the way down, this really cleaned up nicely for him. And just to show you guys how we can see that, I'm going to pull up that linear speed. You can go ahead and look at this club head speed max. You can look at that mid-hand speed and see where he's at. So the first swing, or really the first swing I recorded for him, he's at 79.6 miles an hour of club head speed. He's at 20 for mid-hand speed. So looking at the next swing here for Declan, we're going to see a nice improvement right off the bat. So like I said, our goal here was to get him to hit the ball higher, hit it farther. So let's just go and check on those gain factors. So right away, I can see these gain factors and see what changed. We're going to notice core gain factor lowered a little bit. He's at 1.44. Shoulder gain factor went up a little bit. He's now at 1.31. Not exactly where we want it, but definitely an improvement. And then wrist gain factor is still going to be a little bit low. Still some work to do. And if we go and look and see what the linear speed is at, we're going to see, once again, mid-hands went up basically 0.2 miles per hour, and then club head speed increased by 3 miles an hour roughly. So we're seeing a little bit of improvement there right off the bat, just looking at, those gain factors, looking at the club head speed and hand speed. If we go and look at that mid hands and look at the trace, definitely an improvement in that trace, right? He's creating a little bit more space from that yellow to orange line. And if we go and look at the numbers, right, from a 2D perspective, we can see there's no longer that gap there between his hand and that thigh, that right thigh. And so if we go and pull up those numbers that we looked at before, we go pull up the, wrist angle here, the lead wrist angle. And if we go pull up the mid-hand sway, you can see an improvement. So 127 degrees of lead wrist angle and negative 10.8. So before he was at negative 12, now he's at negative 10.8. Definitely an improvement there, which is great. Now, if we look at the next swing, this is the one that it really started to click for him. So now just checking to see how he did here. I'm going to pull up that linear speed. Let's take a look at that, hand speed. He's now at 20. Once again, pretty much stayed pretty consistent there. And then we're going to see a huge jump in that club head speed. So we went from 79 miles an hour to 90.9 miles per hour with that 7-iron, which is fantastic. So if we go and actually look now at the numbers and see, all right, what changed, right? What helped us be able to do that? We're going to see a nice difference here in those gain factors. So you're going to see 1.44, 1.27, and then a nice improvement in that wrist gain factor of 2.51. So still some work to do in that shoulder gain factor, but we're seeing an improvement, which is amazing, right? And if we go and look at, the other trackers that we looked at here, that mid-hand sway, and we go look at that lead wrist angle, we're going to see an improvement as well. So notice here in transition now, right? Lead wrist angle has a little bit more at the top. He's at 89, but notice he's adding a little bit. So he goes from, 89 down to 84.4, right? So he adds a little bit of angle, and what that allows him to do is create a little bit more space from that yellow line. We can even see mid-hand sway is now at negative 9.3. So definitely an improvement in that swing. And because of that, that's what's allowing him to see an increase in that club head speed max that we were looking for. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully this provides a little bit of insight for you guys. Like I said, I had this lesson. I just thought this would be a really great opportunity to kind of show the usefulness of some of these numbers. Now, it's going to take a little bit of time for the industry to understand where we're at with this stuff, but the sooner you jump on board, the easier this is going to be, all right? And the more that you're looking at some of these numbers, the better. And for your student, it can really provide a lot of clarity for them. And it can instantly show them the changes. And that's a huge, huge win for everybody involved, for us, the coach, and the player. So, like I said, I just wanted to kind of share how I was using some of those new trackers. Like I said, looking at kinematic sequence, looking at those gain factors, how that showed me, all right, shoulder gain factor is going to be a little bit low. What's causing that? Then we went and pulled up, his mid-hand sway, because I was watching his swing and was noticing before how his hands were just, too far away from his body here. He was releasing the club early, and you could see how he wasn't adding any angle early on. He was actually releasing the club too early, and that was causing him, obviously, not to, have the club head speed that he once had. So it was a really quick, easy change. Declan started hitting it really good, and so I just wanted to be able to kind of share the usefulness of these numbers that we have now.